Cool, we have the DAOs out of the way. What we need to do next is open up customer service. And here we need to have a method that allows us to add a customer. So this will be public. And then here I'm going to say void and then add and then customer. And in here, I'm going to receive customer and then registration and then request. And then I'm going to say customer registration request. There we go. It's a long name, but now we need to create this class. So let's just create this class in here, new, and then Java class. And this will be customer registration request. And this guy, in fact, will be public and then record. And inside here, we need to accept the string name, string, and then email, and finally integer, and then age. We're not taking the ID because the ID will be auto-generated for us. Awesome. Now let's go back to the customer service, and you can see that this now works. You'll see how this will come together in a second. But basically at this point, so let me just put this on a new line so you see everything. So at this point, we can perform some logic to see whether we can add the customer. Now here, what I want to do first is I want to check if email exists. If it doesn't, then we're just going to add. Now, the way that we're going to achieve this, let's open up the customer DAO once more. And here we're just adding a bunch of methods, but you'll see later why we are implementing to an interface and the benefit of it. So it's mainly because we will have 3 implementations basically, right? So currently we have 2 implementations, but later you'll see when we use JDBC template that we can just switch without having to break any code. So here, this will be Boolean and then exists person with email and then string and then email. Nice. So we have to now implement these. So within customer list data access service, let me just right click, show context, implement methods, and then OK. Now in here, this will be super easy, and that is return customers.stream and then on a new line dot any match and then C, and here I'm going to say C dot get email dot equals and then email. Nice and easy. Now let's open up customer JPA data access service. We have to do something here. So we have to implement Command O, and then we have to implement this method here, person with email exists. And the way that we're going to use, so this method, so here, if I say customer repository dot and then find, and you can see that we only have by ID. And if I say exists, the same with ID. Now in here, what we're going to do is the following. Open up customer repository. So this guy right here. And in here, we can add methods. So let's have a method, and this will be Boolean. So it's going to return a Boolean. And I'm going to say exists, and you can see I get auto completion right here. So exists customer by, and then email. So this is JPQL. So this is constructing the query based off this name in here. Now let's basically add parentheses and then the email. So string and then email. So here, this is basically the way that JPA will construct the SQL query for us based off this method in here. So sometimes it's also good for us to have an at and then query in here on top of it, but we're just going to use the method for now. So I don't want to confuse you. So exists customer by email. Now let's go back to our class, and here I can say exists customer by email and then pass the email. There we go. And I can just return it. So return that. Sweet. Now let's go to our service, and in here we can say if and then customer DAO dot exists person with email, and we can say customer request dot email. So if this is the case, we want to throw an exception. So let's just say throw new, and then which exception? Well, let's just quickly create the exception. So under exception, let's have new Java class resource or duplicate resource exception. There we go. So also, if you want, you can basically say resource not found exception here. Let's actually refactor this. So here, let me just right click, refactor, rename, and then this is exception as well. There we go. So now everything under this class should have exception at the end. So now let's, and the reason why, it's because if you have a huge code base, then searching for these things, it's much easier. You can use regex and whatnot. So here, this will extends and then runtime exception. And we have the constructor here. We need to pass the message to the super class, and then here response status and the code that we want. So let's just say code that will be, so I think there's a conflict. There we go, conflict. And this guy right here, it's a 409 reason and then conflict. So basically we have a conflict. So then the client knows exactly why the request has been rejected. So here I'm going to say duplicate resource exception, and we can pass a message inside customer. Let's just take this basically. So let's just in here, I think like that. Right. And then this will be email. So let's just extract the email to a variable. There we go. And this should be like that, and email, and this should be email in here. And I'm gonna say customer with email, and then email, or do you know what? Let's not even send the email back to the client, and let's just say that email already and then taken. There we go. So we don't basically send too much information because the client knows which email that it did use, right? So we could just say email already taken. Awesome. So if the person with email exists, we throw an exception. Otherwise, we add. So let's just basically implement this. And this is customer DAO dot, and then insert customer. And now we need to set the customer. So here, let's just say new, and then customer. And the fields that we want are the email, so the request. So customer registration request dot, and this will be name, comma. We have to pass the email now. So request dot email, and then request dot age. Cool. Let me actually refactor this for you, customer. And now we just say customer DAO, insert, and then customer. Now this was maybe a little bit more involved, but you can see what we are doing, right? So if exists, then we throw an exception. If not, then we just register. Obviously, you know, in more complex scenarios when you want to perform extra checks, but for now, this works for us. If you have any questions on what I've done here, drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on.